On.
Hi guys, here we are. It's our first SPA Zoom pre-recorded class. So what I thought we would do to kick this off is to go to like the intermediate wheel throwing, but the basics of intermediate wheel throwing, not get really advanced right now. A lot of us haven't thrown for 3 or 4 months. I don't think I have thrown, other than I just did some rehearsal throwing, practice throwing. I haven't thrown for probably 5 months. So I just threw a couple of pieces just to get my juices going, get the motor memory. And I'm sure some of you are feeling that, oh boy, it's gonna be tough to jump in. So my thought right now was that we would jump in at doing 4.5-pound bowls, maybe doing 2 to 3 different types of bowls. This is first classes I'm going to give you are pre-recorded, and then I will follow up with you on a question and answer session where you can we'll engage with each other live. That also will be recorded for those of you who can't make that session at that time of the day. You'll be able to go on Zoom. Zoom will store these videos in the Zoom cloud, and you will have the option to click on them and watch them. I believe, and I'll confirm with Kirsten, that you can watch them again and again as long as you have the password. She's shaking, my director's over there shaking. Yes, that's true. That you'll be able to go in and watch them again and again. You will not be able to download them. And I'm up for your suggestions. We have a 3-camera system. I'm looking into camera 1, which is the panorama with all my gallery and my little friends in back. Don't be concerned if Lonnie jumps up and tries to grab one of her friends. We have a bird's eye view. This is my cell phone rigged for you to see a bird's eye view of inside the pot. We also then have our 3rd camera, which is my right-handed hand positions. You at any time can touch the screen of that camera, and then a menu comes up and you touch pin video, and it will put that camera as your main screen. So you have the option of editing this at what view you would like to see as we are going. Feel free. Say that again?
We're going to work on messing around.
We're going to figure out. This is our first time recording.
Trial run.
Trial run from the director. So that's the scoop. Hopefully we'll all get our juices going and we'll reconnect. Talking about reconnecting, we had a kiln unloading this past weekend with almost 20 people at it. There's a lot of photos going out online on Facebook and Instagram via Kirsten, our new IT manager and video director. It worked out really well. I got a lot of very sentimental thank you emails from our community saying how wonderful it was to be back with each other. We were successfully able to unload the kiln outdoors with social distancing and mask. It was a very different setup than we have ever done before. It was highly managed. You know my background in managing logistics, and it worked out really well. And also because there were less people involved in the logistics, it went faster and more efficient, but it also spread pots throughout 1/3 of the parking lot where everybody got to see the pots and discuss the pots. It had a good feeling. I hope you'll all come in and start using the studio. Another quick footnote for all of you is added in the calendar where you sign up space. The glaze room. Janice today emailed us, said, could we do that? Because some of you want to start glazing right away for the July wood firing. I do want to keep this restricted where we only have 5 people using the building at one time. Just keep that aware, because we want to keep social distancing proper for my age group, and a lot of you are my age group. Here we go. So I'm right-handed throwing. I have a 4.5-pound piece of clay in my hand. One of the things I really want to stress to you is to be kind to yourself. As we age, we learn that more and more, particularly physically. I did the conical wedging, which most of you know. At some point, if you don't know it, let me know and I'll go over that. But notice this is already in a conical form. This really helps with not having to wrestle the clay, When you have to wrestle the clay because it has all sorts of undulations, dents, and idiosyncrasies, you vibrate the piece, and that's where you create spirals and coning up and down. This form that I've pre-wedged really prevents that from happening. I'm not going to go over ABC of completely new hand, ABC of beginner hand positions. You all know most of that, but we're going to jump right into throwing this piece. I slam it down on the wheel head. I seal the lower shoulder. Really important to seal that lower shoulder so water doesn't get underneath and it slides off. One of the things that's important for you all to understand now with the years of experience you all have, and as you watch YouTube videos, you take workshops, you study with other instructors, there are a million ways to get to the same means and same ends. I've been very rigid in the way I throw for very many years, but there are many ways that absolutely work. Your responsibility to yourself is to take the information that I share with you and others share with you and cull that for what works for you. I'm now 63. I have many more orthopedic issues in my hands that I'm developing. So I'm adapting my hand positions and doing some techniques that I haven't done for all the past years in my career. So coning up, I'm generally doing what I've taught for years is the double-headed bird like this to compress in at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, laterally pushing in, forcing the clay up. As the clay is forced up, my thumbs are vertical, controlling this section of the piece so it doesn't wobble all around. Smooth coning up. Operative hands. I'm developing some arthritis in the fingers, particularly here in the thumbs. So I've changed this hand position as well, where I push in with the left and I squeeze back in with the right, and then I pull up gently. So basically the change in some of these hand positions is changing the compression on your sore spots. And I do that. I change this a lot as I get sore. And I bring it up, compress the top with your thumbs. I don't have a big spiral. Part of the reason I don't have a big spiral was I had this pre-wedged conical shape, which makes coning up a million times easier. Clean up the lower shoulder, just like that. Now we're going to cone down. My coning down position is the bulbous muscle of the left thumb on top at this 45-degree angle. My left elbow tucked in, not floating. If it floats out, you have less rigidity in the left hand and it can throw the pot off center. So I am pushing down with the left thumb. The right thumb comes around and wraps around the back of the left thumb, which I call the heel of the left thumb. And as I push down, I'm pushing firmly in with this L shape of the right palm. Now, when you do this, you generally don't push all the clay down to the wheel head. And right down here is a little lip, an undercut. And what's important here is to take your finger and your sponge and push the clay into that undercut, filling it. That's all pretty much on center. Now I go to the hand position I call cosmetic center, which is the right hand on top, the left coming in at 5 o'clock. Squeeze the sponge that's full of water, push down gently. And this is more of a finesse position to get all the clay particles on center and it's smooth as can be. Now we can open. Again, because of finger issues and age, I'm opening in a couple different ways. The way I normally open is I just take my index finger of my left or the middle finger and index finger of the left right on top, pushing down. And then I take that's of the right hand. Then the left hand on top, pushing down gently until I feel I have about 1/4 of an inch on the bottom. And I pull it open at a diagonal. One of the things I've learned about this diagram. I used to throw all of the pieces with an interior wall that was vertical. You're putting the clay under undue stress on a vertical wall versus a diagonal wall. We're also going to talk about the interior bottom shoulder. So watch, I'm going to start to pull this hand out, and this is a good time to pin the overhead video. And notice the diagonal of that wall. Then I'm rocking my fingers from the center point out to the shoulder, up the wall, back. This is another technique of compressing the bottom. I'm compressing with my fingers versus a rib. One thing I learned many years ago by Tom O'Malley up at the Worcester Center for Crafts in Massachusetts was he taught me how to throw on the hump. And one of the keys to prevent S-curves on the bottom is to create this interior rounded shoulder, not a perpendicular squared off shoulder. That the clay is under much less stress and shrinkage if there's a rounded internal shoulder. So now what we do, which you see a lot of masters do, this is something I've readapted my throwing to, is now I just bring these walls in. I have more of a vertical wall now, but my internal shoulder is slightly curved. Compress my rim. It's always important to go back and compress your rim whenever you move this clay. Now, I have a few different hand positions that maybe 3 different choices that I use in pulling clay up. On a piece this size, this is an adaptation of a hand position called the claw, where I'm putting my thumb, my left thumb, you can see it if you pin on the right-handed hand position. I put my left thumb down here. I put a sponge here with the left thumb attaching to the sponge and the fingertips of the right, and I create that indentation at the bottom outer shoulder. And then together, I lift this clay upward gradually. Don't pull your rims thin. On a bowl form, always remember this rim is going out here. And when this rim comes out here, the rim is going to get thinner and thinner because you are stretching it. So it may feel awkward at first. Compress that rim into a thicker rim, because as you rivet outward, it's going to become thinner. So this lower shoulder, which there's a big section of clay down there, I'm going to grab the clay fingertips, and notice the thumb is affixed to the right thumb, the base of the right thumb, so that the hands are in consort with each other. They're coordinated with each other. They're working with each other. Compress the rim. See how thick I just made that. That's my basic cylindrical, form that I'm going to rib out into a nice shaped bowl. I always recommend, when possible, to compress the exterior wall. That's taking any kind of rib that you want, as long as it's a straight edge, on the exterior wall at 3 o'clock at a 45-degree angle. So there's this slight inward compression. The left hand has a sponge in its hand, and at that 3 o'clock point, I'm pushing the clay out against the rib, and I am firmly pushing the clay inward, compressing the clay platelets in that wall together, squeezing those clay platelets together. It trims off all your wet mush and wet clay from the exterior, removing some of the moisture, as well as compressing the clay platelets together. So this wall now has slightly greater structural integrity from making that move. Compress your rim. Now, as you get larger with bowls, one thing you're going to end up wanting to do is to throw under compression. And that is throwing to form. That's pressing firmly in the inside and outside, or in this case, I'm going to show you using a rib on the exterior. So I'm going to push out against the rib I'm going to angle the rib outward, and I'm going to lift, moving outward, opening the rim, starting to form shape to this piece. It isn't the final shape, but I'm throwing more to form under a lot of compression. So that helps prevent the wall doing the wobbly, wobbly hula hoop movement. Will have to be a new glossary of terms. So I'm going to do that again. There we go. And again, compress the rim. So this is about as far as I would go with that technique. I'm going to compress the rim. Now, Tim's personal aesthetics. I really like bowls in their functional state to have a thick rim, to be a compressed rim. I also like rims that have somewhat of a glazed on the rim. I appreciate more feminine, thin, tapered rims. But for my use as a big, bulky, burly guy, they just don't have the same functionality. They don't last as long. When you clean them in the dishwasher, if you knock them over in the sink, you can chip them. These heavier reinforced rims will last a lot longer. And I love to see the glaze puddle on the top if the top has been compressed with a concave or a completely flat. So now what I'm going to do is take one of these green flexi ribs and I'm going to start to shape this. I take my left index finger and I put it here at the rim. I stick the left thumb out. This connects to the right thumb. These hands are now connected. The purpose of the left finger here is it helps stabilize the rim from starting to wobble and knock off center. So this, you can see from this camera over here, you can pin on the right-handed close-up. This finger is right here, supporting the rim from the outside. The rib comes on the inside in the right hand. The hands are connected, and I gradually rib down the inside wall through the internal shoulder. The internal shoulder is thicker clay and gives you more resistance. So you always get a little bit of a ridge there, which people call beginner hump. And you can moderate that and clean that up. Don't ignore it. Cleaning up the inside, going to compress the rib again. This is not our final shape. Take the time to analyze the curvature, the shape, and its idiosyncrasies. I think probably from the front camera or the above camera, you can see this. This plane from here to here is irregular. There's a few undulations in that. I want to eliminate those. So I'm going to rib it again, creating a really smooth, tapered curvature. Also notice the very bottom of the piece. I'll mark it from the bird's eye view. Right here, this is a curved internal shoulder. That's what we did when I was compressing and rocking my hand back and forth. It's not a perpendicular internal shoulder. It's a rounded shoulder. That really helps for any of you who are suffering. And we see it in from S cracks. That be the reasons you're getting S cracks, because you don't have that compressed rounded shoulder. So now I'm going to do this again and try to get a more finished curvature to the bowl. This is all pretty delicate at this stage. I'm not giving a lot of pressure in this rib. I'm just trying to get a finished interior curvature that I really like. There we go, that looks much better. Okay, I'm really happy with that. I'm really fond of more open bowls, and the reason is because of glazing. a bowl that has like a lot of tea bowls that I make. The exterior wall curves up like this, and so you don't see the interior curvature as much. So most of your glaze effect you're doing on the exterior. On a bowl like this, you really have a wonderful palette on which to glaze, that you're looking down and in. And when you finish the food, you have a wonderful visual surprise. So this is where I am. See how I'm flattening the rim? I'm going to push my fingertip in it. I'm going to slightly concave it. Going to soften the internal ridge and the exterior ridge because I don't want that so sharp that it could chip, but I do like the engineering of a slight separation of wall tension from the rim to the interior wall. And I would call that in top, rim, and interior curvature finished. That's one of the stuffed animals singing. When we trim this, we want to mimic the curvature on the outside wall to match the curvature of the inside wall. That will also allow you to have very even wall thickness. I will make a groove with my needle tool. If you find you have a really thick shoulder that you did not pull the exterior shoulder up into the wall, it's a good idea to try to remove some of that shoulder with a trimming tool meant for wet clay. So if you're looking on the right-handed camera, you would do it like this. And I mean removing a significant shoulder. I do not have a significant shoulder on this. Is my wire tool here? Nope. So then I made a little groove. I had my wire to wire this, and then let it dry on the back with it wired. It's on the wedging table, in fact. And then I would let it dry here. I'll put it back down. Kirsten just ran off and got my wire tool for me. One of the things I see, just like that. You don't do things like that when you're throwing pots. That was just what I was going to talk to you about. So this pot's history. Don't make frivolous movements like throwing tools or lifting your bat and doing this while moving across the room, or people do this regularly and they slam it down, and that alters the shape of the piece. That was a good lesson. That was scripted. She's over there blushing. Okay, let's do this again with a different shape. So one of the things we'll discuss is I have been told by people that have a lot more experience in teaching Zoom classes that you shouldn't do this more than an hour, and that you should consider in the middle of it of taking a break because of people's attention span. I'd like the feedback from you, how you feel about that. Well, the director's giving me a signal, let's take a break. So we're gonna shut down for 5 or 10 minutes, give you a little break, and then we're gonna come back and do another bowl or two. Thanks. Okay, we're back. So Kirsten just informed me that I don't need to direct you all, and we're going to take a break. All you need to do is hit the pause button. So I guess in the future, and I'm up for your input, I'll just keep going and be a good time to take a break. Feel free to hit the pause button versus me shutting it all down and starting back up. So same conical wedge, smooth as could be from a proper wedging. 4.5 pounds to 5 pounds of clay. Now we're going to do a slightly different shape. I like to spin it and paddle it gently in case when I slammed it down, it isn't as close to center as possible. That's another, excuse me, one of the issues of being kind to yourself. is really focus on when you slam it down on the wheel head, you're slamming it down as close to center as possible. And don't be frivolous and go, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna slam it down over there, because when it's over there, you're fighting it like this. It really works to your benefit to have some control at that point. So now we're gonna cone up just like I normally do. Double-headed bird. If my arthritic joints are hurting, I'm gonna change that. Bring the right hand around. If you are looking at the right-handed camera, this is the double-headed bird. Then I'm gonna move the right hand over here, which is at 2 o'clock. Push in with the left hand and clamp this clay together and lift it up. Notice how smooth my exterior wall is. That's all you have to do to cone up a 4.5 to 5 pound piece. You don't have to bring it up into a really tall cone. This is pretty nice consistency, water density clay, but you don't, unless it's really hard clay, that's the time you might pull it way up to soften it and remix it. I do not need to do that with this clay. Coning down. The coning down position is the bulbous muscle of the left hand on top, the L shape of the palm of the right pushing in, and holding your hand there until you feel this 90% on center. Then I switch to what I call cosmetic centering, which is the right hand on top, the left hand at 5 o'clock, pushing in, pushing down until this is buttery smooth. That's it. I'm going to use the index fingers and middle fingers to open. So that's the right middle finger and index finger at that angle. The left sitting on top, pushing down, pulling open at a diagonal, not a vertical interior wall. Compress the rim. See this? A double rim. Here's the clay that I pulled out, and here's the exterior wall. Clean that up right now and make them one. Squeeze the exterior wall, pull it up, compress it. So now I have one uniform rim. Take my sponge. I can bring the outside wall out more to diagonal like that, like an open bowl. Take the sponge in my fingers and rock across the center point while pressing down. Bring the hand back out. Do this 5 or 6 times. Great. Really smooth, really consistent. Compress the rim. Now we can bring this wall in slightly by squeezing the outside wall and pulling our hands up. Again, we change the plane of the rim by bringing the clay wall up, compress it, and we're looking really good. Cut a little indentation with your fingertips in the exterior shoulder. This is where our sponge and our finger is going to fit in order to pull the clay up. My left thumb comes down and is in connection with the right thumb or the right hand. If your bat is wobbling at all, put a little bit of clay into the seam between the wheel head and the bat. Squeeze this clay, gently pull upward, and in your mind's eye, you're pulling upward and inward slightly. The reason I bring that up, because if you think you're pulling vertically, you end up pulling out like this. We don't want to go to that outward angle yet. We want to start with somewhat of a cylindrical form. Notice the very large shoulder here. If you go to the right-handed camera position, from here down is a big wedge of a trapezoid. on the exterior wall. That's the clay that we squeeze and pull up. When you gain height on your cylinder, it's really coming from this lower shoulder. It's not coming from up here. So we push in and we grab that clay, we squeeze it, and we lift it. As you lift, you're going to end up lightening up gradually, because if you apply the same pressure up here that you did down here, you're going to inadvertently thin your wall out too thin. I want a relatively thick wall because I'm going to rib this way out. And as I rib it way out, the wall is going to get significantly thinner. The same with the rim. So we're going to compress the rim. Good. Now I'm going to do just what I did in the last video. I'm going to start to shape it under compression. I'm going to take a straight up and down rib, and I'm going to push out while lifting the rib up. And you can see I'm widening it, I'm lifting it, and I'm compressing it all at the same time. The purpose for this is throwing this wall to shape under compression strengthens the wall, versus when you're just stretching the wall outward with no compression, you're separating your clay platelets and weakening the wall. If you do it this way, you are reinforcing and compressing the clay platelets in the wall while you're stretching it outward, giving it slightly more structural integrity. And do it again. Good. Now, I have a really favorite serving vessel, shape of a bowl that I've always really liked. And the main reason is I like eating out of them, and I also like glazing them, because I'm going to take this shape, which you're seeing right now, and I'm going to bring it way out like that. I'm actually going to create an angular interior using a throwing stick. So I take, just like I did in the last pot, is I take my left index finger here at 6 o'clock. I stick the left thumb up in the air, and I affix the throwing stick to the left thumb. And at 6 o'clock, I gently guide this down the interior wall at a diagonal. And I'm doing this gently. Bring it back up. See the angle I'm starting to create? I'm compressing my rim now inward. I want this rim to be thick, because I stretch it out significantly more. Okay. Lubricate the inside wall. Do it again. Bring the tip through the interior shoulder, and now I can bring the whole throwing stick downward, just like that. So I've widened this significantly. Clean the rim up a little. Let's get the water out of the inside. Going to work that interior shoulder back into the bottom. So it's still somewhat of a rounded interior shoulder, which is really nice on this form. This will be more complicated to trim to mimic this narrow base and tapering interior shoulder. Okay. Now, this is the tricky part. Now we're going to lift this rim up and in. This might be good to look at your right-handed hand position camera. And I'm gradually bringing the exterior wall up and in on a vertical. My fingers slip just a bit, which is just fine. Okay, now I'm going to take a rib on the outside. You see when my finger slipped, I knocked the rim. We will compress that back to shape, or we will trim the rim with a needle tool. We'll see how far off it is once I've compressed it. Sometimes you can compress a little idiosyncrasy like that on your rim. A lot of times you can get rid of it just by compressing it back in. Good. Okay, so now I'm going to take my metal flexi rib and I'm going to angle the interior outward a little more. Which is going to make it slightly flatter and maybe slightly wider. There we go. Clean the inside with my sponge, go up to the rim, clean those little idiosyncrasies in the rim, bring the rim up. So this is my goal, is to have a vertical exterior wall here. Just saying, this is one of my more favorite serving vessels. One of the reasons is when you use a utensil, the utensil can sit into your sauce, into your food, and hanging off the rim without getting covered with food. If you are into udon or Asian food with chopsticks, you can cut little grooves in the rim, even across this way, to lay chopsticks or special noodle spoons. And that is it for this bowl. Again, I'm going to wire it, hopefully without damaging it. There we go. So that's your two bowls that I wanted to show you. We're going to continue in the next few videos doing more bowls, smaller, larger, and then trimming. I also want to show you how to throw bowls on the hump and what that technique is. So the first three of these teaching videos will be specifically towards open serving vessels. Let me know your thoughts if you have any suggestions. Thanks a lot. Bye. Say bye to animals. Bye, everybody.